Hey everyone, this is Dan Weberg. I'm going to be your MC today. I'm a nurse and a head of clinical innovation at Trusted Health, and I'll be helping shepherd us through the day of design thinking in healthcare. So I'm super excited to have you all here. As we move through this event, there's going to be lots of interaction, lots of moving parts, and so we'll try and provide all the instructions and things as we go along. But really want this to be a fun day and interactive, and just have a great Sunday afternoon with us. We're going to dive deep into design thinking in healthcare, innovation, some tangible tools for you to move forward. So we have an awesome crew. I introduced myself, but we have Rebecca Steele, who's a nurse innovator. We have Jay Ostrowski, who's a behavioral health innovation leader, and Christian Millister, who is a founder and CEO of Digital Health Innovation as well. And so you can read all our bios on the platform if you want to get more in depth, but with a matrix kind of theme, we don't read each other's bios. So check us out online, and you have a great wealth of expertise here. So let's move forward to the plan for the day, if we could. So the plan for the day, we're going to be doing an overview of design thinking, and Jay's going to take that and move forward on giving us a great overview. We have a few breakouts, and Rebecca's going to give you the overview of that. And you need to start thinking about what ideas or what problem you'd like to solve, because we'd like to use some real world problems. We'll do a test, and then we'll actually with a theme and a problem that we'll give you, and then we'll also do a session where you have to come up with the idea. And then we're going to do some group share outs and some learning there so we can hear what each other's experience was. And again, this is really about applying the tools and less about solving the problem. We know in an hour and a half, 2 hours, you're not going to be able to solve world hunger or hand washing, but it's really about how do you learn some of these tool sets for design thinking and then take them in tomorrow. And then Christian's going to talk about how we can take this and implement, and I'll wrap us up at the end of the day. So I'm going to kick us off here with just some thoughts about why we might need design thinking in healthcare. And this comes from lots of experience in different organizations, large multi-billion-dollar companies in healthcare and small startups, and consulting all the way through. But what I found as I go around the country is change happens in healthcare in three ways. About 25% of that is performance improvement. About 5% of that is innovation. And about 70% of it is throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks. And even out of that 5% of innovation, it's usually rapid brainstorming with lots of post-it notes, pizza parties, and 3 dots, because 3 is that evidence-based way to choose an idea off a wall of sticky notes. And I think we just have a lot of opportunity to actually use the science of change and these tool sets like design thinking to actually implement innovation and change more effectively. So the point of today is really to give you that tool set for innovation, and design thinking is one tool set within the context of innovation. And if you think of the evidence around high-performing systems really have 2 competencies. The first competency is they're very good at performance improvement. So if you look on the right, the evidence-based practice, that's traditionally what we have as far as kind of the evidence-based performance improvement methodology for changing things in healthcare, and that's really improving what you know. So taking the known information, putting it into practice, whether that's a clinical change or an optimization of one of your processes within a system. That performance improvement's really where healthcare likes to sit. Six Sigma, Lean, Toyota, Kaizen, all of those pieces are part of that performance improvement sort of model. And on the other hand of a high-performing system, they're really good at innovation. And in innovation, that's the new ideas. That's solving those unknown kind of complex problems out in the world and bringing new ideas in. Now, if you only have one or the other, you're not a high-performing system. If you just have performance improvement, you're going to be really good at what you know. You're going to be really good at optimizing that, but you're not going to be able to jump off when the market demands change into the new unknown areas because you don't have an innovation arm or an innovation skill set. If you just have innovation, you have really good ideas that are pulling in, and you're not going to be able to optimize them. So you're going to be super inefficient, but you're going to be on the bleeding edge. And so really in a high-performing system, both of those need to come together, where you can bring in new ideas, optimize them, and then when those solutions no longer are relevant, you can jump back off into the innovation world, pull new ideas in, and again, optimize it. So it's this kind of cycle of innovation, continuous innovation that happens. And what happens in a lot of organizations is we put these two teams in two really separate areas. We put performance improvement with the quality team. We put innovation like with the strategy guy, or some like magical office with a lot of open desk concepts on the corner of a high rise, far away from the actual work and far away from anyone that'll get in their way. And that actually kind of separates this high performance culture. What you need to do is embed them. And it's hard because the innovators and the performance improvement teams usually don't get along. And so one of the tools of design thinking is actually bringing those two groups together and having a methodology to move forward. So if you're going to make a high performing team, you can't just focus on performance improvement. You've got to have the innovation skill set. And today, one of those skill sets will be design thinking. And then the last piece around innovation is really innovation. They're not all good ideas. And so here you can see the guys with their flip-flop floating a surge protector with a lot of beer involved for a stereo. While they've solved their problem, they may end up in the ER right afterwards. And so we have to think about how we strategize around innovation. And we kind of go to two extremes. We either accept all ideas because we don't want to shoot people down, or we shoot people down and we don't accept any ideas. And there's a balance in between, really aligning the innovation towards what the outcome we're looking for is, whether that's a patient outcome or a system outcome, and being okay with saying no and failing fast, but not just accepting the green field of ideas that come in, because that makes your innovation process very inefficient as well. So I'm going to throw this over to Jay to go through the overview of design thinking before we start our day. Jay, do you want me to stop sharing so you can take over?
Yep, sounds good.
Perfect. And as we're doing that, throw questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat and we can respond in there as the presentation goes as well. So Jay, take it away.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Jay Ostrowski. I'm with Behavioral Health Innovation, consulting company for telehealth, and also with Adaptive Telehealth. We make software for telehealth. We do a lot of design thinking, and in our shop, we do that or do it virtually. So it's been great to kind of work with these other people that do this to present to you guys. And it's going to be a bit like drinking from a fire hose. I'm going to be talking kind of about these processes and these principles, giving you some illustrations, and then Rebecca's going to lead you through the process together, and we're all going to contribute and help you guys along so you're not kind of left alone. But through this, we're going to go through this a few times so that you'll have kind of some good experience, and then you'll extrapolate that when you go home, because we want you to embed this in your life. The first thing I need to talk about, though, is your mindset. So we need you to kind of, start thinking about laying down your current way of doing things and taking on a new one. Because if you do the same thing you always did, you'll get the same thing you always got. So if you want new results, you got to do things a little bit differently. And design thinking is definitely different. You'll notice that there's some commonalities with some other methods that you've done. Maybe you've done brainstorming and done collaborative work. What's different about design thinking is kind of the combination of all of it together. And you'll see that as we go along. So let me go here. Next slide. So design thinking is about thinking in general about new ideas. So again, if you've used kind of business thinking before and been logical and practical and pragmatic, you're probably not going to generate those new ideas, because usually we're filtering this in our head before we even talk about it out there. So the idea about this is generating these new ideas that are much more creative. And to be honest, if you're a real pragmatist, it's going to be a little bit of a stretch to have a little bit of faith in the process. But we can assure you, we've been through this process a lot, and we'll tell you you're going to get a lot better results by doing this process. So, but it takes a little bit of adjustment up front. It might be a little bit uncomfortable for you. We're going way beyond thinking outside the box. So with the design thinking paradigm, it might be that the box is now the Eiffel Tower, or maybe a blob of Jello, or maybe the box doesn't even have a shape anymore. So that's kind of how different this can be when you're thinking about, outside the box. There may not even be a box to put things in. But what we do is when we start this, we as a business person, we usually start with what we have. Here are the people that we have. Here's the industry we have. Here's the services we want to offer. In design thinking, we start from the opposite end of the spectrum. We start with the customer and we build backwards from them. We want to understand what motivates this customer, what they want. We talk a lot about the customer. And then from that point, we kind of build backwards. So while going through the process, it might feel real blue sky, green field, pie in the sky, impractical. We start that way, but then we shape it into something very practical and very real. And again, our experience collectively is we find this is much better than the standard way of going through things. So just a quick contrast to think about how business thinking is different than design thinking. So design thinking is kind of a very logical process, and think about yourself in a boardroom, kind of throwing out ideas to people and you write them down on a whiteboard or something. But you'll notice that when you're doing that, you're thinking, oh, that's not going to work. And you don't even say it a lot of times. In design thinking, it sounds like a crazy idea. So all the better, put it out there. Here's the outcome that we want, and it fits in this kind of theme, but we may not know how to actually do it. And that's actually okay. It's actually preferred, because as you start thinking that direction, it provokes other people thinking that way, and you come up with even greater and more creative processes. And you just solve one part of it at a time, but at a later time. So we don't really want to criticize or even pull back from our ideas. We want to put as many of them out there. It's really not constrained by what has been done before, or if somebody will like it, or if it fits or not. We're really going to stretch ourselves to get something that's quite unique. And we want to think about what's the meaning behind this. Will we create a better experience? And then later on, we'll again apply the criteria that fits the mold. So another concept we want to mash with this is service thinking. So we're doing the design, but we're also doing a service. So I want to think about that a little bit more and show you a few ingredients to think about, because these ingredients are basically places for you to treasure hunt different ways you could change things. So we typically have our agents. These are the people involved. Or it could be an entity of some kind is involved. We would call them an agent or entity. And then the props, these are the things that you use to get the job done, right? It might be signs, it might be software, it might be instruments, might be vehicles, but those are the props. So those are things that can also change. Another thing that's a good treasure trove is the setting. Who would have thought 30 years ago that we'd be talking about doing lots of patient care in the home, right? I mean, there were research papers about it, but not a lot of that was happening so much in the home. And here it's becoming more and more mainstream. And then the processes, these are our workflows. How do we go about doing what we want to do? These are like our mental maps. And some of our mental maps of how we do things can have implied barriers. So we want to kind of, let go of how we used to do things and say, how could it be done? What's optimal? What do we wish for that we couldn't have right now? And that's where you get really creative on those processes. And but again, the challenge is to put down the current ways and not think about the barriers, and think about what would be optimal. And then we see if we can solve for those barriers we might see at a later time. So there are 6 kind of main principles we're going to hang our hat on as we think about the framework, and then we're going to apply these principles in the next couple hours together. The first one is pretty obvious. It looks like it's personal. That's because we start really user-centric with this. So I'm going to start talking about these individually. So when we talk about personal, we create personas, and the first time I came across this, it was kind of a funny experience. I was doing radio. I was invited to do a radio show in Columbia, South Carolina, once a month, and I would come on the radio at like 5 in the morning. And I remember the first time I went in there, they had this big picture of this woman on the wall. It was life size, and it had her name, Michelle, on it, and it had these little lines from her, like a little kind of explanations about her, little thought bubbles. It says she's 32 years old, she's married, she has 2 kids, ages 5 and 7. She has a college degree. She works full-time in a professional job. She drives an SUV. And I thought, what is this, like a weird wanted poster? It says that she wants to live a healthy life and be a positive role model for her kids and have a happy marriage and lose weight. And it just had all these details, and it looks kind of weird. And I asked the guy about it, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's Michelle. That's who we talk to when we do our radio show." They had put together a composite of like their ideal customer. And so instead of talking to this kind of nebulous crowd of people all across the state of South Carolina, they are talking specifically to Michelle. And they're having this engaging conversation with each other and Michelle in their probably their car or their office. And what was really interesting is if you think about that, you can start to infer a lot of things about this user. And that's part of what design thinking is if you have a very clear idea who your customer is. And that can create its own set of problems too. Like you might go, wow, that could exclude these other 3 or 4 groups that we want to reach. And that's okay, actually, at that point. What you would do is you'd make a separate process for each one, or separate kind of products or flows, because you want to make sure that we're really reaching that one person. Because if we have too broad of a spectrum of our persona, it basically lowers the effectiveness of this. But if we're kind of highly specialized, you'll find very easily and quickly you'll create something that's really kind of amazing for Michelle and people like her. And then you can go on to the next persona and do a very similar thing, but maybe has a little bit of adjustment that meets their needs. So we'll come back to that. So when you're making a persona, you want to make it big. You want to make them real life, as lifelike as you can. Maybe short of blow up dolls or something weird like that, but maybe that is what you do. And put them on the wall. We typically kind of put them out there where everybody can see them, and you really kind of want to connect with Michelle or whoever your persona is. If you're doing remote patient monitoring and your ideal or most common person you think is going to be an elderly woman that's a widower that lives by herself, if you start thinking about that persona and you make her real and you put her up on a wall in a life-size way, you start to make inferences from her that are really going to change how you go about doing your business, and it's going to help you clearly define something that's really meaningful for that person. So give them a face and a name, because they're people, right? This is not something that we're doing for the masses. This is for that one person, but that one person represents so many other people that you're going to serve. We look at their whole lives too. So it might not just be the service that you have. Maybe your service is affected by all these other things, but you won't know that until you kind of dive into her life and find out what it's like to be her. What do they like to do? What do they eat? What do they drive? What do they wear? Who's involved in their life? What's their setting like? When you create that with these unique characteristics, you really have narrowed into your target market, and it's going to really clearly inform what you need to do. You also need to know kind of what they want, what motivates them, what are they interested in, what do they like, dislike. And again, some of these are kind of guesses, but they're educated guesses. And then once you do your beta, your prototype, you're going to vet all these things, and you're going to gather information, and it's going to shape that even further down the road. But first, you want to start with your persona so that that's kind of your anchor point. So the next concept I want to share is called abductive. It's basically one of the 3 types of logic as you think about this. How do we go about fusing or solving problems? As I was kind of typing this into my Google Slides, a funny thing happened. As I was typing a logical inference for observations, Google started finishing my sentence because it looked at the data that I was typing, and it inferred that I wanted to use this word observations. So that's exactly what we're doing, is we're getting some data about a persona, and then we're going to start inferring things about this person. So this grandma that we're working with, it's not likely that she's going to be able to download an app from the App Store, at least most of them. And so that's an inference that we can make that's probably, a good majority of them. So we got to find a different way to get, grandma on an app if we're going to use an app. That's just kind of an inference that we would make from that. Or maybe they have transportation issues or mobility issues because they're of a older age. So think about your persona is going to influence what you infer from it. This inference kind of mechanism is very powerful. So usually in business thinking, we use a lot of data But in here in design thinking, we're stepping into this person's life and we're using what it's like to be them to educate us on more things. So we want to extract these inferences. These are educated guesses, if you will. We're going to take that away and use that as information that's going to inform how we're going to design these services. So the next design thinking concept I want to cover is collaborative. We talked about the persona and how we're going to develop that, and then how we're going to use those inferences. But this is done as a group. So this is not something typically we do alone. So the richness of this idea is of design thinking is that it's this group of people that are very different, are going to work together and build this whole concept together. If you have done this before, and if you live on the planet and you're a professional person, you've probably been forced to do a lot of collaborative work, and maybe you had good experiences, maybe you didn't have good experiences. But either way, I think this is the most powerful part of it is kind of taking a step back, putting our ego down, making sure we're not dominating a conversation, and we start to value everybody's crazy idea as much as you value your own. We don't want to kind of overly influence or push an idea. Maybe we advocate for it down the road in a different kind of phase of this. But in the beginning, we want to really value each other as people and each other's ideas, and trying to spur each other and inspire each other to have even better ideas. And eventually we'll start adding these ideas together and come up with even, third or fourth or even better ideas. We also need to give each other's their grace and laugh, have fun with it, because it's a great way to kind of bond and really come out with something much better than any of us can do on our own. A couple quick tricks I want to give to you, because I'm a therapist and that's I do a lot of collaborating work, is we talked about valuing each other's ideas. The second, I think, really important one is to ask people repeatedly, what do they mean by that? So they put an idea down, but then ask them, what do you mean by that? And the answer to that should be this third idea, is explain what you mean in like behavioral terms. So why is this important? If we had a lot more time on this conference, I would do a paper exercise with you, paper tear exercise. I'd have you each get a piece of paper, we'd fold it. I'd give you all the same exact instructions, very simple, the same instructions 4 or 5 times to fold your paper in half, tear at a certain place, and then I'd have you do it again. Fold your paper, tear at a certain place, fold your paper, tear at a certain place, and then I'd say, okay, everybody unfold your paper. And what would happen predictably is that everybody would have a different look to their paper. Some would have big holes in it, some would have the snowflake pattern, some would have little slits in it. And I would say, what's wrong with you guys? I gave you all the same instructions and you come out with all these crazy different things. Which one of you did it right? Which one of you did it wrong? And the conclusion you would come to, obviously, is we use the same words, but we all mean something different by these words. So it's really important that we ask each other, what do you mean by that? Because what you mean by delivery might be different than somebody else's means by delivery. So along that line, when you're explaining what you mean, try to explain it as if you're watching a videotape. So the man walks down the hall, he sees a sign, he goes in the direction of the arrows. That's very simple, but it's kind of a third-party way of doing it, not like he gets to the clinic. You want to really say exactly how, as if a video camera was catching it like a security film. So that's collaboration. The other part of collaboration is kind of to suspend judgment, and we don't want to really comment on each other's ideas until or criticize them or say they won't work. We want to save that to different stage. We want to get all these ideas down. We're going to put them on different Post-it notes, because when we put them on a Post-it note, they're easy to move around. We might have 5 Post-it notes that we'd end up eliminating altogether because a new idea came up that eliminates the need for all of these steps, or we might combine steps or reorder them. So putting on little pieces of paper makes it real handy and easy to do that. So that's what we're going to do in our next thing called a journey map. So what is a journey map? A journey map is basically a story. We have a persona, Michelle or Grandma, and we're going to have them go on a journey together. So it's kind of like you're a tour guide and you're going to take them on this journey, and you're going to describe how they go along this journey. And you want to talk about it kind of in third-party terms, so that it's kind of something you can map out, draw out, and then actually maybe even act out in different ways. So we put it up on a wall. We make ideas very accessible to everybody so we can all adjust them and move them around. We want to make it where we're not real protective of our ideas. So remember in the beginning slides, we talked about not every idea is a good idea, right? So there are some bad ideas out there. I joke that ideas are like armpits. Everybody's got a few. And sometimes they stink. And you won't really know that sometimes until, somebody tells you, yeah, no, maybe there's a better one, or you need to use deodorant. I have adolescents, so that's a common theme in our house. So your ideas might be good, they might be awesome, but don't fall in love with them, because it's very likely that the combination of all your ideas together are going to come out with an even better idea. And you may even have an idea that changes a paradigm, even it goes leaps and bounds beyond what you were expecting to go into. So make it easy to modify your ideas. That's why we use the Post-it notes or magnets or text, things like that. And then we want to go about every step of the process. And it looks like a little cumbersome sometimes when you're first doing this. Like, gosh, we really have to talk about those little details. Well, yeah, because it might be that we eliminate some of those details, or some of those details might really influence the user experience for the better or for the worse. So we want to include those. Along this journey, we want to keep track of how the user, grandma or Michelle or whoever, how are they feeling when they start the process, as they go along the process? If they go through that, what would that be like for them? And how would they feel? What would they be interested? What would they like? Or will we meet their expectations? Or what would their need be like that? So, for example, you think about going and renting a car. You have tired travelers going to the car rental place. What if somebody handed them a cold bottle of water right then and a cookie? I know that when I go to hotels, sometimes I see a little snack right there, and I'm like so grateful because I have low blood sugar and I'm dehydrated. Those are from kind of someone doing some design thinking of what does that person need at that certain point, and how can we meet that need? So that's what you're going to be doing with your journey and their persona together, is meeting those needs all along the way. Once they're up on a wall, you look at them all together, and you start discussing that, and you start to see gaps or where we can rearrange things or make them more efficient or eliminate them altogether. So the next part of this, you might be thinking, well, where does my company come into all this? Your company comes in by assigning at some point after you've done those steps, you assign your brand to it. So what are your brand objectives? And one of the best ways to do that is to use a metaphor. So maybe it's your metaphor. This is the class that you want to have, or the clarity, the cut, those kind of things that are the attributes of a diamond. It might be something more like, I'm going to just skip ahead to these examples of like reliability. So you would use a golden retriever, or the attributes of empowerment or magic. You can use the same idea of creating pictures and concepts and metaphors to help give the feeling and imbue it with meaning, the brand that you want to express to that. And from these examples, you're going to start to think of ideas of how you can put that into this whole service line. How do you, at these different touch points, how do you have your brand come out? Will they see that through your service? So those are kind of some of the boundaries that you put around, and that starts to shape your design thinking process. I had an experience. I was in Dubai, and I was doing some design thinking with the group at the clinic there, and they said the metaphor that they came up was, we want to make this like the Emirates airline. So the Emirates airline, if you haven't heard of Emirates, they're out of Dubai. The Emiratis are the kind of very stern rulers there that are pretty strict and law and order types. In Dubai, the Emirates are the ruling class, right? So the Emirates airline is this very posh, very first class, and they started telling me about this service. When you go to the Emirates, it's very expensive. I've never flown with them before. I work with these people, but they said you go up to to the terminal, to their booth, and you give them their luggage, and they give you a cocktail or a drink, or not a cocktail. They'll give you a soda or whatever drink you want. It's usually tea or coffee, and then they just take your bags, and you don't need tickets. They have your ID. They just take you and escort you everywhere, and you have no worries from the time you arrive to the time you get to your destination, because they're kind of hand-holding, concierge the entire journey through that, because I've done this in design thinking. So they wanted to apply this to mental health and to telemental health as their metaphor. Well, the funny thing is I asked one of the people later on, so I heard that they want to use this metaphor, using the Emiratis as a metaphor. And she said, what, we're going to put everybody in jail? Because the Emirates are, the law and order people. So Emirates and Emiratis are, Emirates Airline, Emiratis are very different, and I got it wrong, and it was a cultural moment for me. So what is the metaphor that you want to use for your service? And you're probably thinking a lot of things. It's good to write those down and come back to that when it's time to go through those. So when you're identifying an analogy, here's some quick steps for that, some guidelines. Think of a metaphor that really defines your brand. Make it kind of bold. Make it something attractive, something that you can kind of express and feel. Unless you want your brand to be vanilla and forgettable, probably not. But what is it that you could use as an object, something that embodies that? So the more you can make it real and physical and kind of out there, the better you're going to have an experience with that, and the more it'll be relatable to your customers if you implement that. Then ask yourself the questions of why this, how does it imbue or express our brand, and or is there something else that makes it better? And then you start using the pieces of that information in this design process. How do we make this more like a graduation ceremony, or how do we make this more like a golden retriever service where they feel like we're always there, we're always helping them? So those are kind of the principles and how we can apply them to design thinking. So the next thing are just a couple more things before we wrap up. Interpretive. So as we have everything on the wall, and we have our personas, and we have our customer journey map, we have our brand attributes, we start kind of mixing these things together. And as more people kind of comment on this, you might leave this on the wall for a few minutes, a few days, a few hours, depending on your group and your objectives. But you start to think through this and walk through this, and you could start doing little mini experiments with this. And make sure that your storyline really works. And that's where you kind of try things on, and they're going to fail. You like Dan said, you'll fail fast, you'll fail often, but these trials educate you. Every single one of them trial, and you'll notice at a certain point where you fail is actually a learning experience. You might be able to solve that problem right there with the creative group with this kind of paradigm, and that's where some of this magic in design thinking happens. So the ideal experience may be pie in the sky, but again, if you start doing this metaphor work, you might find some real close approximations. On the slide you see here, this tricked out trailer that was developed from a design thinking where they really made the trailer experience into having a bright light, wood paneling, this kind of warm experience with a front porch. All of this from kind of thinking a little bit differently about how do we make a trailer that really fits the lifestyle experience we want to have when we're out in the woods. So it's not just the designing, it's kind of the reinventing, it's the collaboration that makes all this work into something brand new that we didn't think of before. So again, this is something that we want to experiment with. We want to do low cost, low risk. It might be from acting out the flow. It could be from drawing stick figures. And what I find is when we're modeling, I want to do several different types of trials. So I'll usually recommend we do, a verbal kind of thing, and then we'll map it out, and then we want to act it out, because acting it out and trying to think about where would I get that, where would that be? Those are things that you usually don't see on paper or as you're talking it out. Or as different people take on different roles, they might go, I don't know what to do here, and what should I do? Or they do something different that we didn't expect, and we actually have new discoveries by role playing and trying it on, or we think, you know what, it would be even better if we did this or that. That's where you'll find that you get new learnings by trying these ideas on in a physical way if you can. So sketch, model, simulate, make storyboards, enact them, anything to make it more real for you is going to make it easier. It's a lot cheaper to do this way than to roll out a product and have it fail, right? So when you're experimenting, make it fast. It doesn't have to be beautiful. Don't spend a lot of time on your slides. It should be really, really rough. Cut, paste, just give the concepts out there. Because if you're spending time perfecting it, it might be something we throw away completely. So you really don't want to spend a lot of time on it. So the prize should be go for who made the roughest idea and still got the concept across. You want to use everyday things in the office to be a metaphor for this and metaphor for that. So you don't have to have real clear objects to say this represents this or that, and make mistakes quickly and give each other a lot of grace when you do that, because you know, that's part of the process, is to be, you know, easy and gracious with each other. And then give feedback from everybody. What's it like doing that? Did that work, not work? What would make it better? And what would our customers say? And that's where you start to evaluate, does this fit the paradigm? Does this fit our brand paradigm and the metaphor that we set? Would our persona, knowing that there are needs, their motivations, would that click with them? Would they be excited about that? Is this something they would tell somebody else about as a good experience? Or would they say, you know, it was this and that? So we want to make sure, does it fit with what we're wanting to do, our objectives? So as you think about integrating this, think about this could be something that maybe changes how you go about doing business in general. Just a quick example of the creepy ear on the on the screen. I was talking to my son about some of the challenges that NASA's having on the space station. It's very expensive to send spare parts up to the space station as it's old and things are breaking. So instead of sending up spare parts and looking all logistics, somebody came up with the idea of sending up a 3D printer and some filament, different kinds of filament. So now when something breaks in the space station, they're more apt to 3D print the part that they need and have it right there. So in healthcare, something that's actually they're doing right now is they're 3D printing body parts. So instead of thinking of how do we do plastic surgery on that ear, they're actually saying, hey, let's 3D print an ear with real skin on it. So this is something that's being done right now in trials. I know that FDA has approved already a bladder. They can 3D print and install a bladder in your body if you happen to need a bladder or two. That's in the works, but they're doing many body parts, and they have a whole spectrum of things that can be done. So as you're thinking about your design thinking, it is time to think about really big ideas and see how close you can get to that. And maybe over time you do create a new model of care. That's where these begin. So Christian's going to, as we wrap up after all of our talks today, Christian's going to wrap up and go over this in more detail, how you're going to roll this out into your organization. So I'm going to pause here and pitch it back to you guys.
Thanks, Jay. Awesome overview. And so now we're going to throw it over to Rebecca to give us an overview of what we're going to be doing today and get to work.
Thanks. So Jay and Dan just gave us a great overview of how design thinking works. And so this next part of today's activity will be actually stepping in and really going through the process and getting comfortable with the process ourselves. And so we're going to use and create a group kind of how might we statement and break this down and try to make it as simple as possible so that you guys can practice and then take some of these templates out and into the real world after this experience. So we're going to break it down into kind of 3 sections, which we'll call understand, create, and deliver. Jay, you can go to the next slide. As we go to the through these steps, you'll see that in the process, we'll all kind of have ideas that start to go apart from each other. And then as we kind of start to build those personas and user stories, we kind of bring those thoughts and ideas back together. And then as we start to kind of create ideas, we might diverge in those thoughts. And then as we more work towards a prototype and begin to kind of test our thoughts and the insights that we've gathered, then we kind of come back together. So I just kind of want to put this image here to make sure that everybody feels comfortable with it. Will be a little bit uncomfortable at moments, but then you start to kind of come back together and align the direction the projects or the challenges will go. So we can go to the next slide. So with the understand, create, deliver framework, we're going to do 2 design challenges today. And the first design challenge, like I said, will be a shared challenge or a shared how might we statement. And then our second challenge will be your own how might we statement. Meaning, while we're kind of moving through this shared challenge, kind of be thinking in your head if there's something that you'd like to dig into today, that could be something that we'll focus on. And in that second challenge, we'll do a lot more time in each section of the understand, create, deliver model. So, but to get us started for the first, how might we, we're all going to focus on something we all know good and well now, especially thanks to the pandemic that we've been living in, and that is hand hygiene. So how can we think about and improve hand hygiene for the general public? And so I really, really want everyone to come with like just out of the box thinking today. I encourage you to think big, crazy ideas, things that don't exist. Have fun with this, because that's really what this is about, is really just having fun with the process, getting comfortable with creating personas and journey mapping and doing an idea purge. And so we want to give you all the tools to kind of move through this process. So for this first group challenge, we'll spend 5 minutes in the personas and extremes, 5 minutes in journey mapping, 5 minutes in an idea purge, 5 minutes in some research and analogous inspiration, and then around 5 to 10 minutes to prototype. And then we'll do a quick 60-second pitch. And because we didn't quite know how many people were going to show up, we will break out into 6 tables of 10. And in each table, when you get out of the section, you'll see that Christian has gone ahead, and in the whiteboard of each table, we've got the templates that I'm going to walk us through here in just a second for each of you to use to work through each of these sections together. So Jay, if you'll go to the next slide. The first the first activity will be the creating personas and extreme users. And just like Jay talked about, this is really where you want to kind of empathize and build empathy around the individual that you're designing for. And then to add another dimension is just to kind of create the extremes of those users. So if I'm thinking about something telehealth, maybe an extreme is someone who's incredibly tech savvy and someone who has no technology experience. And then another extreme could be age. So kind of thinking in those extremes gives you the chance to get creative because it pushes the greatest demand on the design itself. Okay, and then we'll go to the next slide where we'll then move through that user journey mapping. And here, and you'll see this again in all of your whiteboards, this is really where you break down that journey and you have the phase of the experience, and then you can associate the top half of this graph with, or the chart, with events that are positive in emotion, and the bottom half with events that are negative in emotion, which really helps you to kind of think about how can you improve different areas of that journey. Then on the next slide is what a tool that we call the idea purge. And this is when all of you have had the chance to think about the how might we statement, and all of these ideas are coming to your mind. Just grab, I encourage each of you to go in the left corner, there's like a stack of Post-its, grab a Post-it, drop it on the board, and jot out an idea. The more ideas, the better. And then once everybody has had some time to jot ideas down, then on the last half of this exercise, you can go over into the right corner and there's stars, and you can kind of vote. And whichever Post-it note has the most votes, you can kind of move forward on those ideas, which will then take you into your next phase, which is that research, analogous, inspiration. And this, I encourage you, I think this is actually really key in this exercise. We're obviously not going to change the world today, but I think out of these types of exercises, what I've seen most valuable is really the insights that come from this experience, the insights that you get from other people's perspective, from other people's ideas, And that all informs your design criteria and really can give you some powerful information to walk away with today. And then the last step, obviously, is to, and you can go to the next slide, Jay, is to prototype. This is, I encourage you, like, include images, make it fun, go out there and, like, you know, pull pictures of Iron Man, you know, if we all had some metal suit, I don't know, just have fun and go to the extreme. I encourage everyone to bring humor to this. I think when you bring humor to these experiences, that makes everybody feel a little bit more comfortable enough to, like, go to a place where maybe if we're also serious, we wouldn't go to otherwise, and ideas. And then at the end, in our next slide, Jay, each of you will put your ideas into this framework so that we can, at the end, kind of share those ideas, pitch it out there. So the first box will be your how might we statement. The second box, you'll put a few of your extreme users or personas, and then you'll put your idea in the bottom left, and then your prototype over in the bottom right. So it's all, everyone's got the same kind of output at the end, and we can kind of move through quickly and give feedback. And then in regards to feedback, I would like to encourage all of us today to really function in the space of using the framework of I like, I wish, I wonder. So when you are going to go talk about or give feedback to someone else within your group or to another group, try to come with this I like statement first, I wish statement, and then I wonder statement, so that we can all really build off of each other's momentum and create some really awesome things. So with that, I would like to, the plan again is we're gonna all break out into 6 tables of 10, because I think, well, we have a little less. So we'll break out into 6 tables, and then all of the facilitators will kind of jump around from table to table. And then at the end, and Christian is going to be really helpful in this, he's going to send out alerts that will remind us when to kind of move to the next exercise. And we as facilitators will be dropping in to help you guys move through. And then at the end, we'll kind of wrap, and then we'll have one representative from each group kind of pitch their idea. And then we're going to take a break after that to let everyone go grab a snack, use the bathroom, do whatever you need to do. And then we'll come back and start our like your own how might we statement design challenges and go from there.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to clarify some instructions. If you're new to Remo and haven't been on this platform, welcome to it. It's a great kind of networking tool, and we're using it really for this workshop. Once we end this presentation mode, the screen will be back to the table view that you may have seen if you joined the session before we launched the presentation mode here before 2 p.m. Eastern. So you'll see a floor plan layout with different tables, and you can move around between the tables by simply double-clicking. We have kind of at the core of it, we have 3 rows of 4 big tables, and each table can hold 8 individuals. And so what we can do is just find any table. If you have some colleagues in the audience, you try to find them. But we want to keep it to the tables labeled breakout table Team A through Team H. I think we have just distributed over that. Again, try to have at least 5-6 people on there. The better the ideas is. As the moderators will be hopping around and help you out. Ask a question, maybe let us know which team table you're at so we can quickly find you. And so we can jump in, and but that's the logistics, or just jump out to the sidelines as well, and we'll be happy to help you with that. And so there was a question here, Rebecca, from Edward. Improve hand hygiene for healthcare workers or general public, or both? And guidance on that?
I would say let's stick with the general public. Let's do something that's just very broad, but everyone is comfortable with it, and have fun with this, and dream big and create some fun ideas. Yeah.
And then Harry asked, how do I find a table? So once we end the presentation mode, you'll be dropped onto what's considered the floor in Remo, and the bottom 2 rows in the center that have the breakout tables. Just double click on any of those to find your table. If you're hanging out in some other table, I'll come and visit with you. You will have to unmute your microphone and your camera in order to start speaking and interacting. Please don't just be a silent fly in the wall, but interact with it. Remote distributed you randomly when you joined, so you may be all over the place. But now that we're dropping back onto the floor, just find a table and have fun with this exercise. There's a whiteboard prepared. If you click on the lower right in the More button, there's a whiteboard that anybody can launch, and then you can all jointly work on that whiteboard. And with that, we'll just have you jump in and figure out. That's part of design thing. It's got to be a little bit chaotic, and so some creative juices here. But we're here to help. Holler in the chat if you need us, and do it in the public so everybody can see the responses as well. All right. Anything else, Rebecca, or should we let them loose?
Let's go and have fun.
All right, have fun. Here we go.
All right, welcome back to the main room. I'll give everyone just a second to pop in here, and then we'll do a quick debrief. So be thinking about if you want to share, and we really are highlighting this not for the solution you came up with around hand washing. We know it's almost an impossible task, given that about 66% compliance happens in hospitals where hand washing at any given time, despite the intervention. So we really want to hear more about the process and what it was like to create the persona, and then maybe do the journey mapping. And remember, the biggest thing about a journey mapping compared to what you might do in Six Sigma on a process map is a journey map is about emotions at the touch points. And so we want to hear how that was and if it kind of changed your frame of reference as you were thinking of things. So with that, we'd love, down at the bottom of your screen, you should have a raise hand button. So if there's anyone who has a burning desire to talk about their experience in the last breakout, share with the group. We'd love to hear from one or two of you. So go ahead and click raise your hand and we'll promote you to the stage. You'll have to unmute your camera and your microphone, and then you can let us know how it went.
Yeah, and we really encourage you to do so, because again, in most of those workshops, as you may recollect from when we did in-person meetings, the most value actually rarely comes from the presenters. The most value comes when other participants share their experiences, their expertise. So please don't be shy. And we've got our first volunteer. I'm inviting Lisa Davis to the stage. Thank you so very much. So please unmute your microphone and camera. Excellent, Lisa. Thank you.
So perhaps it's just because I'm a curmudgeon, but I think one of the things that we found in our group, we had some great ideas, and we eventually kind of abandoned the whiteboard idea because it was really, we were spending so much time trying to figure out how to navigate all of that we abandoned it. So I'm so sorry. I know that.
No, but that's okay. But did you end up doing the journey mapping process, not on the whiteboard, but like talking about the touch points and the emotions?
Yes,
on
we
paper?
did.
Yeah.
We did. And we had all kinds of great ideas, and everyone, I think, really participated. And do you want to know about our idea? Or?
Yeah, tell us what kind of how you arrived at some of the solutioning.
Well, we just sort of tossed out some ideas about what we thought were the barriers for hand washing, and that was time and inconvenience. My group can tell me if I was completely off base with this. So what we ended up coming up with was a sort of a machine that would be in each physician office or restroom or wherever, that would deliver both the sanitizing and the drying piece all together. That would be quiet, that would be easy to use, where it would have either, you could choose to have it deliver a scent or no scent. And we were just but it would be, you wouldn't touch it, so that it would be you wouldn't have to worry about that. And we tried to come up with some ideas about how people could be reinforced for using it. Maybe there would be something attractive that would come up on the screen, kind of like what you see now, some places where you get your gas, although I think most people think those are annoying. But that And then we were just sort of stuck on what we might want to call this. We were thinking maybe clean breeze or something like that. And we were trying to think up what the insignia could look like. Maybe it would be like a bunch of swirls that would have some colors in it that are associated with clean. We would obviously want to pilot test this. And we really wanted to make sure that it was acceptable and understood regardless of race, ethnicity, any of the diversity and inclusion issues that are so important right now. So the rest of my group can tell me that I should stop talking.
No, that's great. Rebecca, do you want to comment on that?
No, I mean, I think you guys did a great job of really going through like what do people enjoy about hand washing, which, you know, there are a lot of things that aren't enjoyable, and really kind of calling out those things and thinking around how to improve them. I wonder, I think, you know, in the groups when we were first, that I was popping in and out of with the personas, I think originally people were just putting like young or old, but then I think when you really were able to kind of dig into one of those personas and add color to that individual, I think it felt like for groups later in the process, it was a little bit easier to think about the positives and negatives for that individual. So you guys did a great job. This is awesome.
Yeah, that's great. And, you know, it really is about the more detail about the persona you can get, the more accurate you can get into their emotions. And so, you know, what are they seeing, thinking, feeling, hearing, what, you know, trying to put their shoes on, be in their headspace. And then that helps the journey mapping as well. So we're about to go to break here. We're going to take 5 minutes, but before you go to break, we really need you to do something. We need you to get in the chat, and we need to put, you need to write in the chat a problem that you'd like to brainstorm on in the next session. So we're going to pick just a handful of them, make them short, make them very tangible. You like hand washing, you can pick something similar to that might be in your headspace, and put that in the chat. And we're going to pick the top few of them, and then we're going to put you, we'll come back to the group as a whole, and we'll do our next breakout session around those problems. And we'll provide some more instructions after the break. And did I miss anything, team, up here? Cool.
Just one more thing. When we come back, we want to start out with a clean room in case you want to use the whiteboard again. Again, if you just want to have a free-form conversation, have one person be the scribe maybe on the whiteboard, use the templates, don't use them. But we want all of you to jump down to the bottom row where we have breakouts 2, team 1 through team 4. So find yourself a table and just let's all congregate kind of down in the back pew for the session.
Yeah, go down to the named breakout section 2 tables when we're ready. But you got until, let's see, 4 o'clock Eastern, which is 1 o'clock where I'm at, and so we'll see you in about 5 minutes.
All right, and post in the chat. Lisa already get a head start here. Thank you.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Get your coffee, sit back down at your home office, put on your sweatpants, and let's kick off the second half of our session here. So as you will see when we get back to the floor, there are tables on the bottom row that have 4 different ideas that will need to be tackled. And so this time you can pick the one that you are most interested in. Each table can only have 8 participants. So if your table's taken, sorry, you have to pick another one. And again, this is more about the process than the problem. And so this should be a next fun kind of event for us. So I'm going to throw it over to Rebecca to give you just a refresher on what we're going to do, the timeline and the steps, and then we'll put you out into the floor and you can pick which problem you want to solve. Rebecca?
So again, we're going to do those 3 steps. We're going to understand who we're trying to solve for, and then we're going to create some ideas, and then we're going to deliver. So the first section is, you know, obviously you're going to find your table that has a how might we statement or an idea already kind of surfaced, and then you're going to dig in and spend some time looking and building personas and understanding kind of the extreme ends of those users. And then you'll move to your journey map, where you really kind of go through the process and really pull out the emotions for that user as the journey goes. And so we'll spend about 10 minutes or so in each of these sections. And then we'll go to create, where you'll just kind of idea purge and then really start to do some of the research and build insights from analogous inspiration. And then you'll move from taking all that research to prototyping. And then at the end, we'll hopefully you can fill out the form that has your how might we statement, your persona, your idea, and then a prototype. Again, if the Remo whiteboard doesn't work for you, please feel free to go and do it just on a piece of paper and talk amongst yourselves. This is really meant to be more, again, about the process, and then for us to really kind of hear the great ideas that you've come up with at the end, and to be able to provide some feedback and learn how we can go use this process out in the real world. So it'll be about 10 minutes in each section, and at the end we'll do like 1 to 2 minutes delivering your kind of idea at the end.
Hey, Dan, Lisa has her hand up. Should we invite her on stage? Maybe it's the old hand. Maybe it's another clarifying question.
Sure.
So, oh, no, she took her hand down. All right.
Okay.
Left over. All right. Safe by the bell. Good. All right. And so we have 6 named tables down there. So find the one that aligns best with your interests. Yeah.
Let's take it away.
All right. We'll drop you back on the floor. Welcome back, everybody. And there's Dan.
Right. Hey, sorry, it takes a minute to click the buttons. Welcome back, everyone. Hope that was a useful exercise in getting your problem solved with food insecurity, elderly, and telehealth. And then I'm blanking on the last one. What was the last one? But that was your table, Rebecca.
Ours was a low internet connection.
Oh, that's right, low internet connection. Yeah, that seems to be like every day. Or how to get people off mute. Maybe that's a problem to solve with telehealth too. How not to talk while on mute. Anyway, we're super excited to just debrief with you all. So we want to do just quick, like 1 or 2 minute debriefs with each table. What did you learn? Maybe what was your solution? How was the process? And then we'll move through, and then we'll do a wrap up with Christian at the end. So does someone from the food table want to come up to the stage? Just click that raise your hand button and give us a quick download of what you talked about and how it went. Hi, Helen. Welcome to the stage. You are on. Would love to hear how it went for you.
We had a good conversation. I can't say we got very far in solving the problem. So, but in this one, so we talked about why there is a push for primary care providers to do universal screening for food insecurity, which sounds so technocratic. And I'm sorry, I know we're supposed to be talking from emotion here, but whatever, that was the starting premise. And why that happens or doesn't happen in primary care practices, and why we would want to do that at an individual level. And then we spent more time, and I think that if we'd had, like, if this had been a full process, useful is talking through from the perspective of we set up a idea that we're a primary care doc in a rural location with limited broadband and not a lot of support staff for doing screening work with patients. So then that question of the different phases of interaction became that much more relevant for our premise, because you don't have a broad number of resources to talk through. So the questions of where the patient will be in interacting with the practice, we had set up generalized patient outreach and communication, so not related to a particular visit, but just your healthcare practice as a source of information and resources and helpfulness. Scheduling and pre-visit, any sort of pre-visit work, then the visit, and then the follow-up to the visit. And I think that if we'd had time to go deep into those different channels as potential locations where screening would happen, and then in what format would be appropriate and most comfortable for the patient, that would have been useful and revealing, but we ran out of time. So we had a good starting premise, though.
No, it's great. And you bring up a good point here. So number one, I think when we think user-centered design, we always think we have to do it from a patient perspective, but the physician is a user too. And so the emotions you have in implementing that solution are very real and need to be addressed just as much as the patient side of things. So I think that's a good place to start. I think that's really good. And then, yeah, just kind of, and then the structure you had, like the journey you created and the emotions that would happen for the physician on the touch point, not a lot of resources, maybe getting frustrated, all those type of things are things that are going to eventually, when you come up with a solution, are going to stop it from being implemented if you don't address them. So I think even though you felt like you didn't get far, you actually hit on a lot of great points in the process. So awesome. Rebecca, anything from you?
I was was just going to call it the same thing that you just said. And, I think just really digging into those emotions is so helpful, but understanding the personas first to get there is key.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Helen. That was awesome. All right, so the next group was the elderly group, elderly use of telehealth. I know there's some initial really great conversation there and interest. So is someone from that table like to come up and share what you solved and maybe some insights from the process?
You got me?
There you are. You're on, Joe.
All right. Well, since I'm elderly, not quite that far yet. But the elderly that live in areas that don't have real good access to broadband, it's a problem. Plus you couple that with being elderly, and some of them have a fear of technology. They're isolated. They can have multiple comorbidities that they're dealing with. They have no regular caregiver sometimes. The one thing they do know how to do is they know how to use the phone, and they can talk to just about anybody on the phone. So they're just limited in what they have. So and then for those that do have caregivers, family members, as you're dealing with an elderly parent, it also wears on the caregiver as well. So the whole emotional support thing around the family causes issues too. So things that we talked about, it's like who already goes to the house on a regular basis? Meals on Wheels, the groceries on wheels, EMS in the neighborhood, the postman. And then, of course, we all know and have read over the last few weeks that Amazon is very interested in the home sector for healthcare. So now imagine your Amazon delivery person bringing whatever it needs to come to your house, helping you set it up, getting used to it. But you got to use, as one of our group members said, you got to use it over and over and over again to keep up your skills. And for any of us that have had elderly parents or grandparents, they often forget how to use things unless they're doing it on a daily basis. Otherwise, we also talked that, if they do have cable, remember, cable companies provide internet service as well, but they're often on a limited budget, fixed income, and they're probably going to buy the cable service that they need to get the channels they want to watch, and probably not interested in much else. But so I think that there's a lot of issues on the emotional part of this to deal with the elderly, and then the technology is often not available in a lot of spots. Some of us are fortunate if you live in an urban area and you've got lots of bandwidth, that's not an excuse. But if you live in some of these rural areas and you're this elderly individual,
Yeah, great call out on some of the pain points and the journey and really some pieces to tackle around access to internet and those different things. How was the process as far as brainstorming and kind of the journey map? How'd the process go for your group?
I think it went great. We had this person named Rebecca that kind of kept us in so that was extremely helpful. And, I think the entire team weighed in on just about every point. So it was a good group.
That's great. Well, thanks for sharing, Joe. Appreciate it.
All right. Do I take my hand down now or something?
You can take your hand off, and then Christian will kick you off the stage with the big boot. And
he can leave voluntarily. So
yeah. Oh. And then we have one more. We had one more table from the table that hasn't shared yet. Does anyone want to share out?
I like that we had a lot of people thinking about this pretty in depth, and that brings out a lot of color, and the use case gets more and more rich. I wish we had time to have more extreme examples of solutions, more kind of out there thinking. And I know we're in a time crunch, so it doesn't feel as comfortable to do that. But that's kind of, I think, some of the stuff Rebecca and I and Dan and Christian really would encourage you guys when you're doing this in other settings to really let it fly, to be really outside the boundaries of what would be normal, really even illogical solutions. Stir that kind of fun thinking, the Iron Man examples and other things, and then you bring it back down to earth later on. But that kind of thought-provoking exercise is really helpful when we have the time.
Right. Just give an example of where mine was taking me when Rebecca said that and had hand washing. It's like, what if we don't have hands? What about cutting off all hands? That will eliminate I mean, again, just as a crazy idea, right? But then you take this idea and you say, okay, what if hands would never get dirty, right? So what if you eliminate the hand washing need? Or what if your hands never have to be used to touch somebody else? So
you don't have to touch anything.
Right, but you don't have to touch anything. So the gruesome idea of cutting your hands off to eliminate hand washing can then lead to other conversation. And that is that. And you see the right when I said this, right, there was a cringing, there was a burst of energy, right, just among the moderators here on the stage. And that's what happens when you have these crazy, outlandish ideas. They release some tension. They make it easier, and then more creative ideas can follow from that. So yes, so I do encourage this out-of-the-box thinking because it can unleash some new ideas that nobody ever thought about.
And then we don't fear failure because we know most of them are going to fail. So it's really comfortable and very gracious to say, yeah, what about this? And that really gets that creativity flowing. So Sharon, welcome.
Oh, thank you. So our group talked about elderly and being able to utilize telehealth in the home. So our situation was with an 88-year-old woman who, because of COVID, was very fearful going into the office, didn't know how to use an iPad for FaceTime with her family. So how do we get her comfortable and have the ability to be able to have telehealth encounters with her providers, just as well as she has her FaceTime with her family? So some of the thoughts was, how do we introduce this to her? And can we have some type of concierge service, either since she's sort of fearful of people coming, of her being around people. So maybe is it, is there a way that we can easily train her utilizing telehealth through either start by talking her through it on the telephone and be able to get her to download it? Or do we really have to send somebody out to the home? So I think it's something that we would have to be aware of, the different levels of experience or comfort people have, and be able to accommodate those. So either, do they have home care? Can it be the home care nurse? Or do we send some type of technician out to the home? Or who is that right person that would be able to help her get it set up on her side? But then depending on the different level of comfort on how we would be able to do this, to introduce them to it. But we also need that on the provider's end, because not all providers are comfortable with telehealth as well. So we need to ensure we have the support both on the patient side and on the provider side.
Yeah, great share out. And this kind of brings us back to those how might we questions. So some of the things I heard in there was it's hard to set up, it's hard to download potentially or use initially. Providers, same thing. And so the how might we question be by how might telehealth be delivered without downloading anything? Or how might you never have to touch a piece of technology to get this, or something like that, where you can kind of open the possibilities to what we know now, like Zoom and FaceTime and stuff. But what if you never had to touch that? What if it came through your TV and it was easy as pushing one button kind of thing? So great insights there. And I think you hit on a lot of the emotions. So thanks for sharing, Sharon.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're going to kick it over to the wrap up here, and we want to talk about how you might implement this moving forward. And I think, Christian will take that on. And one of the things that we need to remember is this rarely happens in a 1 8-hour day or 4-hour day. Personas alone can take weeks to build out correctly, and same with journey mapping. So don't think that this is a offsite with a lot of pizza and and Pepsi products, and you get some magical solution. This is a process, and innovation takes the same kind of stringent process that you might give to a Six Sigma process. So remember that in the back of your head. This was more about getting you introduced to it rather than actually time boxing it in something that's reasonable for you to actually get a working solution. So with that, Christian, take it away.
Great, thank you very much. And yes, thanks for everybody for the participation was really great to hear. And thanks, Diana, for that feedback also, that the second exercise felt a little bit more fluid, and it means you must be learning something. So definitely, there were two elements at play here. Is A, to teach and to demonstrate design thinking, but then also to teach and demonstrate the technology here with Remo. But everybody found their own way to do it, so really great. So implementing design thinking and the actual solutions, what now? That's going to be the focus here of my slides here. Really going to tie this back to kind of that breathing pattern, right? We breathe in, we breathe out. We have divergent thinking, we have convergent thinking. And so again, the same applies to, okay, now that you learned about design thinking, how do you bring it to your organization? So that's one level to look at on how to take this, what we've shared here today, and make it and integrate it into your practice, into your team, into your environment. And then the other is, okay, now you have a solution, how do you actually test it out in the real world? And so really those two different aspects is what I want to highlight here and emphasize on. So now that you know about design thinking, how to use it, how do you integrate it, that's the one challenge. And the second challenge here, okay, now you have a solution, but how do you roll it out? How do you implement that solution? So I'll give a few talking points about that, just some more guidance. Because from my perspective, the problem is not the lack of solutions. A lot of people have a lot of ideas for solutions. Oftentimes, the problem is that the slow speed of solution development in a complex environment. We all understand that we cannot design solutions anymore like we did 20, 30 years ago, because it's such a complex environment. I mean, healthcare alone is one of the most complex industries there is, with very different stakeholders, as we've discovered here very easily in our persona brainstorming. And so that is one of the challenges. And then the other challenge that I see is that there's not a problem. It's not the lack of innovation. There's billions of dollars of that are funneled into digital health solutions and really great solutions. However, how can we integrate as healthcare delivery organizations how can we adopt that innovation and integrate it? And design thinking is one way to accelerate that. But design thinking in itself is just one aspect of it. So I want to take the design thing as the core concept and want to now kind of build around it. What are all the other different elements that have to be in place in health systems, in FQHCs, in rural health organizations, rural health agencies, so all the people here that are on the call here on this Sunday afternoon. And it's always this balance then between speed and pragmatism, right? We need to have solutions that are actually realistically implementable, and we can't take 18 months to solve the problem either. So we have to be one of those buzzwords over the last 20 years has been agile, right? Agile, iterative, and design thinking naturally lends itself to that very rapid process to come up with some ideas. But then what's the process to actually take these solutions in there? I'm very grateful to design thinking. I was introduced to it at the Mayo Clinic 18 years ago, and it definitely shaped my career path and the way I think about integrating, implementing telehealth solutions. And so, but there's also a challenge between coming up with great ideas and then actually bringing them to fruition. So I worked with the Center for Innovation at the Mayo Clinic, and at times it was an ivory tower that came up with great solutions and great ideas, but then never really managed to really implement them on the floor. And so I've thought about this a lot. And for me, the vision is that if you have a problem or you have a new innovation that's been introduced, that you can make as an organization a decision in days, that you can validate the solution or the innovation in weeks, and you can implement it in months and not years. And so that really is that, because we got to be, as a healthcare system, we got to be more agile, because there's a lot of other players now, which I'll share here in a minute, that are entering the market that are not coming traditionally from healthcare, and they have a very different solution development life cycle. And they can be much more nimble and more agile. And so we got to catch up here and go the same way. Design thinking, one of those principles. And the three drivers here, I'll go through this very quickly because it's late in the afternoon. But is that we have an evolution now from the patient to the modern healthcare consumer. We have a massive amount of digital health innovation, and then there's non-traditional competition like Amazon Care or Walmart Health or Best Buy Health that is entering here. And so modern healthcare consumers, they want convenience, they want a good price and trust. So that's one of the drivers. And so really we want to be at that intersection of quality, convenience, value, and confidence. And that's where design thinking comes about. If I just think about those different examples that we had here, just taking a slow internet, right? So we want to have it be convenient. We want to have access to high value services. We want to have confidence in the service, and we still want it to be in good quality. And so it's reflected in here. That's what we're designing toward when we're designing virtually anything these days, or a more efficient screening process. Granted, it was stipulated by the government, but ultimately it's also how can we identify individuals with food insecurity so we can get them access to the right services so they can improve their health outcomes. And again, it's in those 4 different realms. Second driver here, the digital health innovation avalanche, right? Billions of dollars being pumped into healthcare here. This is a chart from venture capitalist investment in digital health solutions. And in 2020, numbers vary depending on where you look, but it's roughly $8 to $10 billion that were invested into digital health solutions. And there's about 50 billion that have been invested just over the 10 years. And so that's a lot of innovation, a lot of new solutions that are coming out there that we need to be ready to integrate. And design thinking, again, is a way to integrate these solutions, not starting with a solution, but really understanding the problem and then identifying how can this innovation that's out there can help us to solve the problems that we want. And so the work of going through the personas and the story mapping is really always needed. And then the third driver, as I mentioned here, the non-traditional competition. So the Amwell's Teladoc MD Life, the new telemedicine virtually only companies, and then Walmart Health, Amazon Care, Best Buy Health, the Cleveland Clinic teaming up with Amwell, doing the clinic. So there's just a lot of different new players, and a lot of what they have in common is that they have been practicing design thinking in their organizations to iterate, to do the process development, or as Dan said, sometimes spend weeks on really defining a persona that technology solution is going to be designed for. And so likewise, on the healthcare delivery side, we need to identify the different personas of the patients that we serve, the different clinicians that are users as well. What are the personas of the different stereotypes or archetypes, rather, of the different physicians? All right, because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and expecting different results, and design thinking is a different way on how to do things and how to tackle these problems. And it's also a different way, as Dan pointed out multiple times, differentiation to Lean Six Sigma. So how do we then implement innovation? It's a multidisciplinary approach, or how do we address these challenges? At the top layer, we need to have leadership engagement, we need to still have project management, and we need to have change management. And then on the second row here, we need to have an agile approach. We have the design thinking, and we need to be workflow centric. So really, those are the different elements that all need to play together. And as you can see, design thinking here is a central element in the design of the solution, but it needs to be surrounded by a larger framework that really helps an organization to take these ideas that come out of this design thinking and then actually get them into the hands, get those solutions to be validated, to be tested into the hands of the people that can benefit from those solutions. And so let's go through these 6 elements here. Leadership needs to set the vision, give autonomy, and provide the resources, right? Design thinking, it's a great process, but it takes time and it takes some prep work and maybe an offsite and maybe some boxes of pizza, as Dan just mentioned. But really, leadership needs to be engaged and supportive and needs to have bought into that so that you can truly fully engaged into design thinking. From a project management perspective, every project, even when you're using design thinking, that's not just by settling on design thinking doesn't mean you abandon all the other kind of traditional things. It's just you scale them back, but there's still an initiation, there's still a justification, and project management really per se is mostly a communication tool, and to make sure that all the different elements that are involved in the solution building, that they're engaged and involved. And so that's part of project management, and that needs to be in place. And then change management. So especially when we talk about then once you develop the solution, how do you roll it out? And I'll dive a little bit deeper in here because that's one of really the core things that I've focused on over the last 15 years is that how do we manage that change? I mean, people don't like to change the way. We know compliance in hand washing is still really low, even though it's an easy change, and numerous innovative approaches have been used to do that, including, I think some organization asked the physicians after coming back or the staff after coming back from lunch break to put their hand in the Petri dish, and then they grew the cultures from that bacterial fingerprint, handprint, and you could see all the bacteria growing, and then they put it as beautiful screensavers all across the organization with these different handprints, which looked artistic, but everybody knew that, oh, I just ate my lunch and I came back and this is what I had on my hands while I was eating lunch. So very visual representation that was very innovative. And still we have a relatively low compliance rate. So change management is really key. One of the tools to look at here that I encourage you to look deeper into if you're not familiar with it is the ADKAR framework. It's about raising awareness, creating the desire for the change, supplying the knowledge, building then the ability, and then supplying reinforcement. And it's interesting how the design process, right? When we look at the personas, when we especially look at that emotionally driven story map, the journey really, that gets right into here awareness and desire, just really truly understanding the motivation of the different users, whether it's patients or physicians or staff or administrators, what is their desire? And then what kind of knowledge do they need in order to perform the task? What training do they require? So a lot of the elements, once you're coming out of a design session, you can kind of extract from that here. The reason I love this model is that it postulates that if you have all 5 things in place, then you will have actual change. So you have the awareness, you have the desire, you have the knowledge, ability, reinforcement. Okay, then you have change. Here's the interesting thing that happens when you take one of those elements away. If you take awareness away, if people are not aware, then they're confused. Why are we doing this? Why is this important? So the how might we statement, right, paired up with that emotional journey can really help to raise awareness as to why this problem is important. If there's no desire, then there's resistance, right? Why should I change? Why should I care about this? Why is this important? If I don't have the knowledge or I don't have the ability, that will lead to reluctance or frustration. And then if I don't have reinforcement, then we'll have backsliding. And so the change goes out, but then it's not maintained because people are not being held to account. And so that's why I like this model. So every time we roll out a new solution or being involved in that, I'm always looking, is everybody aware? Have we created enough desire? Do people have the knowledge and the ability? And what metrics are we providing? Who's accountable for making sure that the performance does not go back to the old standard? And so this is a really great way then to take your solution and to make sure that it takes hold in the organization. And when you've done your design thinking in a good way and in an inclusive way, you'll have a much easier play here at the very beginning, because the awareness and the desire will be very obvious and evident. And especially if people contributed to the solution, then you'll also have a lot of knowledge already. So you're already checking 3 of the boxes here. Ability is then about more the training and the actual user experience or user friendliness of the solution. But all of that can be fleshed out of design thinking. Going to the second row here, then the agile approach. Again, do it iteratively, right? You don't have to come up with a perfect solution the first time. Brainstorm, come up with some idea, do a prototype, do a proof of concept, take it out and try it out if it works. It's just we are no longer living in a world, if we ever have, where we can think very hard and with some brilliant people for 6 months come up with a perfect solution and then implement it and it works. That just doesn't work that way anymore. So let's bring everybody together. Let's have some ideas do that design thinking process, and then let's get it out there and get the real-time feedback on that. And so that's really, that's again, that convergent and divergent thinking, and then the convergent thinking of bringing it back, and then just embracing ambiguity. We don't have to figure out the perfect solution upon the first try, but we can iterate on it and build on each other's ideas. And that's really is the key. It unleashes creativity, is what the design thinking process is really designed to do. And then the design thinking, which we've talked about here, focused on that user experience, on the actual observations, thinking outside the box, empathizing, designing, IDing, prototyping, and then validating. So the real kind of a process here that we've talked about today. Well, we didn't talk much about prototyping, but about validating, but that's then the next step. All right, and then last but not least, Jay touched on that. We're doing mostly service design here. Everything that we're doing is for the most part in healthcare delivery, at least that's where my mind is at, is on the workflow, right? There's different people working together, there's handoff points, and so it's really about identifying what is that workflow, what experience do we want users to have from an emotional perspective or from a productivity perspective, and then what is the right solution, the right technology that fits that. But it's really about selecting workflow and requirements first, and then selecting the technology, rather than being bedazzled by some new technology that comes around and that looks cool and great and gets a lot of attention, but it's not clearly understood how that's going to be used. Again, that's where you can use design thinking as well if you come across such an innovation. But it's really workflow and requirements first, technology selection second, and then so really then about and then thinking about, and Jay mentioned that, the core workflow, but then what happens before we get this information? What happens before the hand washing, right? So when I said, okay, cut off the hands, so yeah, well, maybe if the hands don't have to be dirty, then we don't need to wash them. So that's one way. Or the downstream process, if we never have to use our hands to touch anything, then we don't have to wash our hands either. That's the downstream process. And so there's always the focus on the core processes, and then you want to use, again, divergent thinking, say, okay, what happens before and who else is going to use it downstream? And it just takes you up to a higher level. And then there's the technology. Good. So that's kind of what we wanted to kind of convey here. Just the really design thinking is a great and can be a very core technique, and it can be a core part of your culture of how you tackle process improvement, how you tackle innovation adoption, how you tackle any kind of challenges or of change, and really embed this. It's such a great universal tool that can be applied onto multiple different scenarios, just like we saw here. The topics that emerged afterwards. Although nobody wanted to talk about promoting kindness, we'd rather tackle the other problems. And so we'll have another session maybe in a few months, and then we'll have talk about how can we promote kindness. So good. And with that, if you never read it, and if you work in a larger academic medical center and want to think about Orbiting the Giant Hairball, is a really great book about this. It's about entrepreneurship as well. Okay, a few more slides here. Sorry, Dan. I know you're coming on here, ready to take over, which is great. One of the things I wanted to also bring up here, a few slides, is about the ideation process, and then how do you prioritize, right? Because there's so many ideas and there's so many things that we could improve, but how do you actually decide on what to do? And that's, again, where the leadership involvement is so critical, and some form of project management as well. And so what we're always looking at, okay, what are all the different ideas and challenges and problems that are out there? And then we need to bring them down into concepts where we apply maybe design thinking. And then when we have a viable solution, then we bring it down to a project, and you can look at it from a strategic fit. You can look at it from financial viability, as well as the does this clinically make sense? And then let me wrap up here with this one process to take this. So you have an intake process where somebody says, okay, I have this challenge, or we have this new regulation, or we have something we really need to improve performance. There's an evaluation, and then a prioritization. Then we need to verify that this is actually something we should be taking on. And then what I call the solutionization. I'm originally from Germany. We like long compound nouns, and so I and I like to make up some of my own words here. So solutionization. Then there's the validation, that you take the prototype, you take the idea out there, and then there's the deployment. And actually the danger lives in the deployment phase, that it doesn't stick because of lack of change management. And design thinking really covers all the last 4 steps here, right? Design thinking helps us with the verification that we have a valid and important problem here. It helps us, obviously, at the core with the coming up with solutions to the problems and the challenges, and then validating them. And then also with the deployment. The deployment in itself is a design problem, and so we can look at that from a meta perspective as well. And then I'll just leave it at that, so that we can achieve the vision of having decisions on doing something about a problem within days, that we have a validation and a solution development within weeks, and then we can implement the solution and get it out there and see the benefits of it within days. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dan. Thank you very much for attending here, for designating your Sunday afternoon to spend with us. I hope that was valuable. I definitely had a lot of fun here, and we'll all come up here on stage to kind of wave goodbye, and then hand it over to Dan for the final words.
Thanks, Christian. Awesome. And the hardest part is the implementation side. I spent the last 8 years at Kaiser Permanente. We had over 800 ideas come through our pipeline, and we probably implemented across the system maybe 2 or 3%, and that's like high performing. So don't ever think this is an easy process, and that you're going to get full pipeline of ideas to implementation very quickly. And I just wanted to share this resource actually by my side. We use it in our Masters in Innovation program. It's called Managing Innovation by Tid and Besant. It's actually a really awesome book about how do you implement change in systems, and the leadership and the things you run into. And there's a number of resources as well, and we can share those offline. So thank you for your Sunday. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time is when we'll kick off the keynote. I'll see you again there and kick off the conference with y'all. But just really appreciate your engagement, your time. And again, we're a resource for anything you need related to design thinking or innovation in healthcare. So have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you bright and early tomorrow.
Bye, everybody.
Great. Thanks, everybody.